Hi, my name's Steve Turcott, and I'm here with MirrorMaze to do a Thinking Particles tutorial on how to create an organic form, such as this example here that I created. Um, so it's basically self-generating, except for a few keyframes here or there. And I think doing it through Espresso is a pretty good exercise if you're a beginner and just getting into understanding how to set up particle groups and have them set off certain events, things of that nature. This is something that could also be done with MoGraph, but I think in the end, through Espresso, you can have a little more control over the outcome and when things happen without too much trouble. So let's just get right in and get going on it. So we'll add a null object, call it Emitter, and add an Espresso tag to it. We're going to be using the piece storm, so TP generator piece storm, and need to drag our emitter null in there because if we go back and take a look, for those of you new to Thinking Particles, the piece storm won't move, won't rotate unless you manually connect the null object to it. So we're just going to connect this emitter position to the null object to its global position. Control click to expand the node and add the emitter alignment so we can have control over the rotation. And the rotation is listed as global matrix under the emitter. So now if we go back, take a look, it updates, it moves, we have a lot of particles. So let's take care of that because we don't need that many particles. So let's just zero it out. And we will rotate it 90 degrees so it's emitting in the positive Y direction. And while we're here, we'll also make our first particle group and we'll color it a nice bright red so we'll know that's our group 1. So now we go to Thinking Particles TP standard P group. Excuse me. And attach that to our particle birth. And we'll drag our group 1 into our P group and create a P pass with Thinking Particles TP initiator P pass, which will allow us to control our particle group with various dynamics, things of that nature. So now we need to reduce our amount of particles in the P storm. So we want a shot of just one particle, which it does default to. So we're just going to key that in at frame 0, move forward one keyframe with G, and add a value of 0. So now we'll have one particle moving up and going pretty fast. We need to increase the life so it doesn't die before we make it to the end of the timeline. So I just keyed in a value of 600 and I think I used about a speed of 80 in my example. So now we have particle floating up toward the sky, looking pretty good. We're just going to change our field of view so it moves pretty vertical. I think exactly straight up, which is what we're looking for. So now we're going to set up the tracer object. So we'll go to MoGraph tracer, and we need to make that a child of a sweep NURB. And I'm going to add a star just to illustrate something that I found out earlier, which I thought would be pretty helpful for you guys if you don't already know. So I'll show you that in 1 second. We just have to set up our tracer. So we're going to add our P group, group 1, into the tracer. And now we'll see that the star grows vertically and it jitters and looks pretty bad. Whoops. So that's what I wanted to illustrate here with the star, because we can see the rotation going on that we may not be able to see as easily with a circle, which we will add. But what's going on here is the banking is being adjusted, probably by the particles movement. Just looks a little erratic and not exactly what we're going for. So we can just, if we turn off the banking there, we'll notice that it now moves nice and smoothly vertically without any jitter. So there we have that. And what I also did was adjust the scale so the top is a little bit narrower than the bottom, and that looks pretty good, just so we can get kind of a natural feel. So that doesn't look bad. And we can replace that star if you want, or you can keep it. I'm going to get rid of it and add a circle. And there, that looks pretty good. And I also like to add fillet cap to both the top and bottom, and steps of about 4, radius of 2, just to give us a nice smooth lip. Okay, now we'll head back in and we're going to add some friction to slow down the particle, and that's also going to help us trigger an event. So we're going to go to TP dynamic friction, and we'll see what the default does. Should slow it down pretty good, and it kind of inches along and then stops. We want it to slow down a little bit quicker, so we're going to use a value of 2. That looks pretty decent, and that's going to change just a bit anyway, because we're going to add some wind. So TP dynamic wind. And we need a null object to control our wind, and we'll call this wind 1, because we're probably going to use another wind dynamic. So we'll keep those organized. And we can also call this stump. That's fine. So now we have our stump and we have our wind, and whoops, we didn't drag our wind. Oh, we did. Okay, so now let's check it out. We probably want it blowing straight up. If we grab the wind, rotate it, holding shift, we have a 90-degree rotation. The wind just blows it straight up. We don't really see a whole lot going on yet. And I think in my example, I used a spherical fall off. And we can change the strength so it's a little bit less. And I think for a turbulence, I had a value of 90. So let's see where that takes us. Not bad. We have some pretty natural looking movement, which is good. And I think I'm going to turn down the structure size just a hair. I was messing around with that in my example. And basically what the structure size is, we have a little glitch, which we'll take care of, is if you think about it like you would a noise, like in terms of noise, in animating noise levels, it's like increasing or decreasing the global scale of the noise. So just the frequency at which the noise takes place. So 80 is a little bit smaller than the default, and that is about right for what we're going for. And that little twist there, I think, was caused by the frequency of the turbulence. It was just happening a little quickly. So let's see if we... There. That looks pretty good. I almost want to let it keep going. Although it is going a little far this to the left here. So let's try to get that going almost vertically. Let's turn up the turbulence. Move the wind up. There. I kind of like that. That looks good. You can play around with it, obviously, and adjust it to meet your liking, but I think we're going to stop there. And we're going to just key the value of the wind to kill it. And we could do that with the decay, but I'm just going to do it this way because I know that I'd like it to end at a certain point. So we'll just have it end at around frame 100. So now it grows up, kind of twists over to the side and stops. Now what we need is a shape. We need our flower head. So we're going to start with a sphere. And we can make that editable. And we're going to want to change the axis of the object. So we're just going to grab our point selection tool and can't really see what's going on here. Oh, I didn't grab my point selection tool. There it is. All right, and if you have your axis center docked, go ahead and axis to selected points and execute. So that will move your axis to the bottom of the sphere, which is where we want it to sit. So the bottom of it sits exactly on top of our trunk. So now we need a cloner to attach that, and we can just drag it in here and change it to object mode and drag our first particle group in. And we have a massive sphere sitting on top of our stump. Let's just see how the position of that looks. It looks good. It's attached right at the bottom and moving. So that looks good. We don't want it quite that big, so we're going to change the particle scale. We want to bring it all the way to 100, and we're going to go in Espresso and adjust the scale further in there. We'll have a little more control. So we'll go to Thinking Particles, and then Dynamic, TP Dynamic, and oh, no, we don't want Dynamic. We want Standard and Scale. So now we attach the scale to the P-Pass, and we're going to scale it up over age. So black is 0 and white 100. So now we can watch it. And this gives us, the effect nothing's there and it's kind of emerging, growing from the ground. That looks pretty good. And now we can change the scale to maybe 120. Or you know what? I think we need to change that here. So we can change our sphere size to 300. That looks pretty good. So now it grows from 0 to 300, and you know what? I want to bring that axis up a little bit because I see that there is some separation there. So we're just gonna grab our axis tool and drag it up, and there it goes. That looks pretty good. All right, so now that we have the cloner set up, we can just call that flower head. The next objective is to get particles that are growing on the surface of this. And to do that, we're going to use pborn. But first, we're going to need to set it up so we can actually get the emitter to connect to the surface. So to do that, we need to TP helper get data. So we're going to get the data of the particle's position. Or actually, we want the velocity, because we're going to trigger when the next particle emitter begins. And to do that, we're going to use a compare node, thinkingParticles, nope, Espresso General, where is it? Logic compare. And we'll connect the velocity to our input 1 and input 2. We want it to be something greater than 0, because we want the next particle emitter to start before we reach a speed of 0, because right now this is all based on velocity, which our friction is feeding into. So we'll just set it at 20 right now and see what happens. We keep the data type as real and the function to less than or equal to 20. So now we have that, and we're going to set up our next particle group, particle emitter, which is going to be pborn. So we'll go to TP generator pborn and connect this output to its on input. And we're also going to want another particle group. Make it green. All right, and a p group. Standard group, there it is. I would normally control drag this one down, but they have a hard time updating, so I like to just go back into the menu and drag them out manually. All right, so now we have our pborn, and it's going to be at the axis, the world center right now. You'll see it. There it appears. And it happens a little later than I'd like, because we want, let's see if I have the example here. We want these oblong spheres to emerge, sooner before it reaches its full growth. We want them to start maybe about midway. So we can change our compare node to maybe 50. So it starts a lot sooner. And when we see that green appear, that means that's when the pborn is going to start. It starts a little soon, but you know what? I think that's pretty good for now. So next thing we need to do is get those particles on the surface of that sphere. So to do that, we are, let's see, pborn, count is fine. The life, we can bring the life of those up because those are going to stick around for a while. And we're going to make another P pass, thinking particles, TP initiator, P pass, and drag our group 2 in there. And so now we're going to use the function of surface position, and that's going to help us get the current position of a specified surface, which our surface is going to be the head of the flower. So we're going to connect that, and we also need to thinking particles, is it standard? Yeah, standard set data, and attach these nodes to position. Particle is just going to be fed right into PPass for group 2. And I think we also need to attach the alignment. So we'll go ahead and attach that as well. And we want a certain type of particle to be emitted from the surface. Right now we don't have it connected, so I guess we won't be able to see anything. So let's just go ahead and add a particle shape, particle geometry, and another sphere. I'll just drag that below, and our particle group number 2 can go into the particle geometry, and we're going to create a TP standard P shape and connect that to our P pass, and our sphere can go in there. Now we need to tell it what surface we want these spheres to be generated on. And okay, sorry. To do that, we can, what I've tried and what didn't work, but I'll show you anyway, is I thought you would normally drag the flower head in there, but then you get, you don't get the desired effect. If you would drag the sphere into the surface position, which also doesn't work, you get it. They start to emerge. And sorry, this sphere is in the way. They start to emerge on the surface of the cloner before it's been repositioned onto this particle. So you run into lots of trouble. So I found a pretty good workaround, and that requires the use of a connect object here and the correction deformer, which is going to help grab the data for this sphere, which is our flower head. So we're going to make the correction a child of the connect. And now we need to copy, so control click our flower head, and we just want to make this editable. Now we have our sphere, and that has the UV coordinates that we want to assign to our correction deformer. So I think now if we just drag our UV onto the correction, that is what we want to do. We need to attach our flower head, our cloner, to the connect, and also feed the correction into the P surface position. And I think now we're going to start seeing some particles growing. Yeah, there they go, on the surface of that cloner. So that's pretty good, and that's what we're going for. We just need a little bit more of a random look. Those all look really big. So let's go in and change that. We're going to use a P scale, so thinking particles, TP standard, P scale. And I think what I did was change the z-scale to about 220, and we'll also have those scale up over age so they don't just appear abruptly on the surface. So let's try that. Here they come. Those look pretty good. Now if we could have some variation, I think we can just crank that up to 100 and maybe reduce the scale. I don't think we need them quite as large. So that's not bad. And I think I'd even like to have a few more. Oh, and another thing, for the surface position, you can change this to from face to vertex or edges. If you do vertex, that's where the particles will start going crazy. They should emerge from the vertex. Not sure what's going on there. Or you could also do edges, and they will form from the edges. But I just chose face because we'll get the random effect that we're going for. Now if we adjust the count of these p-borne particles, we can adjust it to maybe 180 and see what that looks like. We just want to get a fair amount on the surface. And let's make that even higher. So now we're getting 250, value of 250. You know what, maybe we can try rate. That'll give us a little bit quicker results. So now we have lots and lots. And that doesn't look bad. I think we actually have too many. So we're gonna reduce the rate, and then we're gonna key in a value to shut those particles off. So maybe at about 90. And also, if you want to, if you don't like how it's filling out, you can adjust the random seed, and those will kind of regenerate in real time. So you can, that's always a nice parameter to adjust. And especially if you plan on duplicating it or something like that, that'll be helpful. So we're going to leave it about right there. So at about frame 80, we are going to key this value and have it hit 0 at around 85, which is fine. So now we have it growing, these form, and now what we're looking for, let's just do a quick render. That looks pretty good. We have quite a few more than I do in my example, but I think that's fine. Doesn't have to be exact or perfect. You could really play with it all day and get equally as great results, I think. So now what we're going to do is we need another, we're just going to duplicate the same setup, and we want a new p-storm to generate from the surface. Want to duplicate this same initial setup that we had before, because we want more particles to be emitted from the surface of that flower head, but we also want to keep the ones that we have. So these are going to be the stems that you've seen in the reference video. So we're not going to need the wind for this after we duplicated it, and we're also not going to need the particle scale. We still do want the friction, and we still want the p-born. The only thing that's going to be different is the group, and we've created group 3, and we'll make that bright yellow and add that in. And I think that, let's see, still affect, the friction still affecting group 2. I think. You know what? I think we can get rid of that friction altogether. And now we have our group 3. I think the friction, I don't think we needed that. So now we're going to do basically the same setup here, so we might as well just duplicate that. And change the p-pass to group 3. And I think that's going to need to update. I don't think we'll see anything yet because it changed back to group 2. That's why I normally like to add them from the menu. And now we should get some particles. Now we didn't need the spheres there. Let's see if group 3 starts generating. There they are. You can see the boxes within the green. So that is, they're definitely generating on the surface, which is what we're looking for. So from here, we need to create a p-storm, which will turn on when these particles die. We're gonna get rid of this these keyframes. So we'll just delete the whole track for the p-born, and we're gonna bring the rate back up to 80 and see how quickly they populate. Maybe enough. Change group 2 to ticks. It changes them all. Box is fine. Or you know what, ticks. We'll go with ticks. I think we'll be able to see it better. Alright, and another thing we want to do is change the life of the p-born so they die relatively quickly. That way they can set off the next event. So that's pretty good. And we do want them to stop after a certain point, which we can determine. But that looks pretty decent. So next we're going to go to, see, we want to add an age. There it is, TP condition P particle age. And we're gonna say when these particles die, so we need to change the type to die, it's gonna turn on a new generator, and that generator is going to be p-storm. And so we'll connect that and turn that on. And we're also going to need to get the data from this particle in order to have the p-storm start on each one of from the exact spot that those particles are created. So we are going to use a get data node and connect that to our group 3 and position, alignment, control click to enlarge that and connect our position. Move that up, make it nice and neat. Emitter alignment. There we go. So now, when those particles die after 20 frames, these ones are going to start emitting, and we're going to just do a shot. I think I just did a shot of one particle for each of the P-born particles. I think that's how that should work out. And we'll change the size. That's just gonna make it a little easier to see once they're generated. So there they go. And we have lots of particles. They're moving very fast. So the first thing we can adjust is the speed. And we can, I don't know, bring it down to 20 and see what happens. And that looks pretty good. Let's see. Speed it up just a little bit. There we go. See what that looks like. Okay, and we don't want those to start emitting so soon, I don't think. Maybe right about there. So we'll have to go and change our P-born to, let's see, I forgot to change the compare. That's something I wanted to change. There we go. That looks a little better. What I did was I changed the compare node. Which is based off of the friction from group 1. So, where'd it go? Oh, I'll change it to 30. And that should give us a pretty nice starting point. That's pretty good. I like that. They start at a nice time. And now we definitely want them to stop emitting because we don't want an endless amount of stems coming off. Or maybe you do. But I'm just going to go ahead and turn off this P-born. Let's see, let's figure out which frame would be best. Start it from the beginning. And okay, so if we can maybe shut it off at around like 150, that would be pretty good. And then we'll just have them die, or not die, but stop generating at like 155. So now, if we preview, there, and they're all done generating at 155. We'll extend our timeline just a little bit. So there, we're going to have a lot of branches. And another thing we can change on the P-storm is, let's see, the speed variation, which might be kind of nice to add a random effect. Maybe change that to 50. So we get some variation in the speed. of when the stems are created, or the branches. That looks pretty good. So now we have a nice, pretty random generation of these particles. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to want another tracer setup. So let's see, let's find our one that we already used for the stump, and we can just duplicate that. So control click and drag down, and we'll double click and call this one branches. We can keep the circle in there, that's fine. We probably want it a little bit smaller, so we'll just go with radius of 1 centimeter. And we can also keep the scale from large to narrow. That will probably be fine. Now, in this tracer, we're going to have to replace group 1 with group 3. And now those particles should turn yellow and trace. And they're tracing to the center, which is not where we want it to trace. So let's see what's going on there. Okay, so we don't have our P-storm set to a particle group yet, so we're going to add a P group, and we're going to connect. And we also need to create a new particle group, which will be group 4, and it will be a blue. So we can drag that on in there. And now we should see the particles. We also need to make sure we change our tracer, because I think we were tracing the wrong particle group. It was just tracing back to the P-born, when in fact it should have been just spiraling out, sort of like this. Now we need a little bit of random movement, and I think we are well on our way. So let's just watch these all the way through and see. They should stop emitting. That looks pretty good. Now we need them to just slow down and grow some bulbs on the end. Then we'll be in good shape. So we're going to have another P-pass here to control group 4, thinkingParticles TP initiator P-pass, and dragging group 4. And we need some friction to slow down those branches, and we also want some wind for some turbulence, to give the branches or stems a more random effect. So we need another null object, and we'll call that wind 2 and drag that in here. And I think I used a spherical type of fall off here too. So we'll go with that for now. And the strength can be, we'll try 0, turbulence of 80, and structure size maybe 60. These are kind of just random values right now, but I think that may be where we want to take it. And then our wind icon didn't update. There it is. We'll just drag that up so it's close to the head of the flower, and see how those interact. Nice and curly and curvy. Pretty cool. Doesn't really matter, you know, which direction they go in for this particular exercise. You can kind of tweak it however you'd like. One thing that I probably will adjust in here is the decay. So as they move away from the center of the wind, they won't be affected as much. So let's see how that works. Get some nice movement. The friction slows it down. That's pretty cool. I think we'll probably keep it right there. We'll increase to about 300 frames. Check it out again. And I think that's pretty good. You know, we could add maybe a little more decay, or maybe even a little more friction to just slow them down. So why don't we just add like maybe a value of 1.5 for friction. And while we're out here, we can also add another cloner object. Or we could have duplicated our setup from before. Actually, why don't we do that? Because it'll save us a little time. We'll just call this bulb. And the sphere there. Now we need to attach this to group 4. Lots of balls filling up the screen. Too big, and they need some random effect applied. And they also need to scale from their birth. So let's start with thinkingParticles standard scale, and we'll connect that. And over age, so we're gonna bring it to about there, and that should look pretty decent. Now we can also just change the scale of the sphere because it's way too big. So we'll just, we can change it up here. If we highlight those, control click, and let's just reduce the scale by half. So we'll call these 0.5, and if you control enter, we'll change the value of all of those. And I think those are still way too big. Way too big, but they scale up now, which is good. Let's see, we can, yeah, I guess we'll have to just go ahead and reduce the scale even more. So let's just go with 0.1. They can be pretty small. I don't know if those updated or not. I don't think they did. So here they come. Those are still pretty big. We can scale them maybe to like 40%. We could have been adjusting from there, I guess, too. There they go. Those look a little more reasonable. Still kind of big. 20. And it all depends on what you're looking to achieve, so I just thought I'd go somewhere close to what I had, and I think that's pretty decent. It's kind of cool. A lot of them are probably intersecting and things like that, but it's not too big of a deal. It's pretty chaotic looking. We can check our branches on. I don't think we've had a look at those yet. And those are pretty thick. A little too thick, I think. So we're just gonna reduce the radius to about a quarter of what it was. And we can also just bring this scale down a little bit. I think that looks pretty decent. pretty crazy. It's a lot fuller than my example. But again, you know, you'll get different results each time. And another thing we can do is, for the scale of these, we can have it vary, you know, maybe 60%. So then we'll get some more random effect going on. And we can even, you know, turn the p-born off a little sooner, so that way we get a little bit less. Maybe move the wind a little bit, see if that affects it at all. So that's looking closer to our example. And we could even go ahead and shut off the wind if you feel like it's affecting it, you know, a lot longer than you would like it to. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I'll just key the value of the turbulence down from frame 200 to like 210, and just shut it right off. And then we can always drag that parameter around, the keyframes around, to shut it off sooner or later. So we should see the wind die down, and there it goes, and the friction slowing down. Turn on the branches to see how those look. And I think I'm going to reduce the size even more, so they're pretty thin. Do a quick render. And that looks pretty good. It's right along the lines of what we were trying to achieve, and I think we're there. And now I don't think we're going to go through the lighting and texturing, but it was a pretty basic setup. If anybody's interested, let me know, and we can definitely go over that. And if anybody has any input or things that they would like to see in the future for tutorials, feel free to leave those in the comments below. Once again, this is Steve Turcott, and thanks for watching.